Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thanks for coming into this room. I just immediately feel overwhelmed with emotion just seeing the chairs filled in this room. People who are prepared after a morning of davening and stretching our hearts to listen and learn, to stretch our hearts again, to listen and to bear witness and to learn and to hold the stories that these remarkable individuals here on the panel are going to share this afternoon. So we're gathered this Shabbat for this occasion to mark Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, which begins on the Jewish calendar tomorrow night, Sunday evening, and runs through Monday into Monday evening. And I want to start really with a word of gratitude to Alexia Gyorody and to Sam Hutman, who came forward a few months ago to think together, to dream up together what we might do on this Shabbat to mark the occasion. And over the course of the conversations that we had as a team with Elise as well. Where's Elise? With Elise, our program and events manager, the conversations that we had really kept coming back to two ideas that we wanted to center in our conversation this afternoon. The first is an acute awareness that we are living in a time in which the number of survivors in our midst are dwindling. I was just in the last year, I'm thinking about you, Sam, and thinking about, and you, Caroline, some of beloved friends, Holocaust survivors who you were in deep relationship with, who we've had to say goodbye to and lay to rest. And I think we in this room and those of us joining virtually are acutely aware that the opportunity to hear the stories of survivors are fewer and fewer as the days and years go on. And so we wanted, as the primary responsibility in some senses of Yom HaShoah, to center the stories of survivors, to hear firsthand accounts of what tragedy you all lived through and what it means to continue to get out of bed each morning and to carry the stories and to carry the trauma and to continue living life to its fullest. That is the first and most important reason to gather in this moment in acknowledgement of Yom HaShoah. But as we continued the conversation in connection with this first point about the dwindling number of survivors, we started to think a little bit about the different ways that memory of the Shoah, memory of the Holocaust, is carried and the differences amongst different generations on how that memory is carried. And wanted to invite members of our own community who are the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of those who both survived and perished in the Holocaust to both tell the stories of their loved ones, in a sense, in a place where the survivors themselves can no longer tell those stories, to ask the second, third, and fourth generation to be the spokespeople in this moment, in this space, of the stories of their loved ones. But also, in a second round of sharing, to think a little bit about the different ways that different generations hold memory of the Shoah. And what are some of those differences and what might we learn from those differences? So the format of this conversation will be that I'm going to ask really each group of people up here, one at a time, to share a really condensed version, a 4 or 5 minute version of their story, or the story of their loved one. And then we'll do a second round of sharing, starting to explore some of the different ways that the generations relate to the traumatic experience of the Shoah and how that memory is held today. And then we really want to open it up and let folks here ask questions, which can pertain to any of what was shared in our time together. Okay, so it's my honor to welcome this panel. To my left is Ella Mandel. Ella is a Holocaust survivor, an Auschwitz survivor, and we're going to start by opening our hearts and turning our attention to Ella as she shares in just a few minutes a little bit about your experience, where you were during the war, and perhaps one or two images that you can bring forward to us to help us understand what it is that you experienced and what you want us to know in carrying your story forward.
Thank you. I will try my best, but you know, it was many years. I thought it's okay, thank you. I try my best to share some of my war experience, but you know, once I start talking, I find it very difficult to stop because it suddenly comes to my mind and it continues going and going until I can stop and be free again. But I'm going to try myself to do the best. I was 13 years old when Germany invaded Poland. We had heard some rumors about the Germany doing horrible things to the Jewish people, but they were all rumors and they didn't want to believe it. You couldn't believe it that somebody can be so ruthless, heartless, and just go on telling all the young people, take a stick, take a stone, run through the city of Berlin, which is the capital city of Germany, and just break all the windows, all the doors of the Jewish stores, burn the synagogue, throw out the books that we use for praying, burn the books, and just go as much as you can all day, all night. That was the beginning. And I lived with my parents and two sisters. I was 13-year-old that we heard that Germany is invading Europe. And we knew then it's not going to take too long for them to enter my town because we were a small town in Poland. It was a very small community. Poland is a very small country. So we knew it's not going to be too long for Hitler to invade. And soon enough, we were told to stay home. There was no school. We sat in a corner with my friends, my parents, and we just waited to hear the soldiers walking through the city. That's what happened, and they passed our city without any fight because Poland didn't have an army. This was not prepared to do any fighting. So they passed our city, but the next day they came, put barbed wire around it, and created a ghetto. And we lived in my hometown in ghetto for about 2 years. No school, no going out, wearing a yellow star, and just being confined, unless they called you out to go to work. And they told us that everybody has to work. Well, in ghetto lodge was not so bad that not everybody worked. But once we left my hometown, you know, with Germans, there was always relocation. They never let you stay in one place. They have to find bigger places where they can kill us, the Jewish people, on the street, in the fires, wherever they could. So from my hometown, the next stop was Lodz Ghetto. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Lodz Ghetto. There was a huge ghetto set up from all the small communities around Poland, instead of the one ghetto that we lived in my hometown. Now we live in Lodz Ghetto where Jewish people came from all countries around Poland. I'm trying to switch some that you might not find interesting, but it's part of my life, and I find it difficult to just leave it. Anyway, we lived in Lodz Ghetto, I would say shortly, about 3 years. In a Lodz Ghetto, everybody had to work. There's no such thing as staying behind. And if you didn't work, then they came in, find you in your room, and put a bullet in your head, throw you out of the street, on the street, where they keep all the dead people burning, setting a fire. In Lodz, my dad decided he cannot make it anymore. He was a big, tall man, and the food we got was a slice of bread, and he just couldn't make it on it. And we tried to share it with him, but he refused. And he said one day, I'm not going to work, I'm staying. Whatever happened will happen. And my mother said, no way, you're going to stay, and we're going to go and leave you. No, we had a little, like a closet. And my mom said, we put you in the morning in the closet while we all go to work. You stay in the closet until we come home in the evening and share our piece of bread. We got one slice of bread, maybe a thick slice of bread that we shared. And Dad stayed in this closet like only 3 days. We came in one day and he had passed away. And my mother said, no way am I going to leave Dad outside for the Germans to throw him around. We got to bury my dad. We got to bury him, and we have to find a way. This madness is going to, someday it's going to be over, but Dad has to go to the cemetery. The cemetery happened not far from where we lived, in the ghetto. I had a friend who was using a wheelbarrow. She was translating sand from one place to another, or rocks, whatever they called it. And my mother approached the police, could you help us take my husband to the cemetery, because I'm not going to leave him for the Germans. So she said, I'll be happy to, but it's winter, it was February, and she said, I'm the only one who has a shovel. How are we going to dig a grave? Everything is frozen. So my mom said, we're going to bring our fork and our knife and whatever we have, and let's just go to the cemetery. And the girl said, we have to go very early because I have to be back on my job. So we put that on the wheelbarrow. We ran as fast as we could to the cemetery. And we barely could dig a grave, but whatever we could, we buried him. And my mother said, one day, I hope some of us will be able to come back and dug out the grave and give Dad a proper burial. Right now, let's just run back to the rooms and go back to work. And that's what happens in Lodz Ghetto. We left my dad in the cemetery, and we eventually were relocated from Lodz Ghetto to Auschwitz because the war was going, and the Russians were coming very fast from the eastern part towards Berlin. And though the American got engaged, called the what?
I'm just going to move it a little bit closer. It's hard.
Too much?
No, you're good. Just so that you can hear, so everyone can hear.
Thank you. I'm sorry. So Lodz Ghetto, the order came today that we all need to run to the railroad station. There is a train waiting for you. You all got up on the train because you're going to be relocated. We never stayed long enough in one place because you couldn't get rid of too many Jewish people. Then he located us again. So we all got loaded on the train, no air, just a little slot on the top open, just not even good enough for animals. But that's when they loaded the trains up and we went. We didn't know where we were going, but we are going on the train. For my memory and from my talking to people that have gone, we were on the train maybe almost 3 days, and they opened the trains. A lot of people died on the train because there's no water, there's nothing. There's just a place to die. We were jumping, the ones that survived were jumping out of the trains and being pushed forwards to a big sign where it says, Arbeit makes you free. That just means that you are in Auschwitz and work has made you free, so get ready for work. We heard about Auschwitz, we knew it's a death camp. We saw the chimneys burning all the time. And we knew this is going to be probably our last stay. I'm going to skip that. I skipped it about mother.
Do what? Can you come to the final part with your sister? And then I'm going to pass to Jason.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's very difficult. Okay.
By the end of your time in Auschwitz, what was the situation?
Yeah. Okay. We, for some reason I don't explain, but we didn't stay long in Auschwitz. We left my mother there, being the guest and burned. But my sister and I were taken to a small camp where we worked for the Germans. And we were able sometimes to bring home a raw potato that we would cut in four and share with somebody, our friends. From Auschwitz we went what was the end called the Dead Walk. It was the Dead Walk because we were marching to the next place, which was Bergen-Belsen, and that we knew this is going to be the end. We're not going to make it any further. We were marching in the snow, and every once in a while you look down and you see blood because somebody didn't make it, so just got a bullet, and that's it. I have to concentrate. Bergen-Belsen, there was nothing to eat, nothing to drink, just to die. Outside there were barrels with water, dirty water from bacteria, bugs that flew in and maybe landed in the water. But we were so hungry and the stomach was so empty that we drank this water. And the majority people in Bergen-Belsen have died from this poisoning water. We couldn't take it anymore. I was the one who also got sick. I was laying and dying, and my sister was sitting next to me and crying, and my friend was sitting next to me and just yelling, screaming at me, "Don't you dare close your eyes. You're not dying. You're going to survive. You have to live. We're going to be forever together. Don't you dare to die." She was actually hitting me, and I couldn't understand why, but it was her way of keeping me alive, not to close my eyes, not to die. Where finally the day came that this where was I? Bergen-Belsen. In Bergen-Belsen, who came from there? The British. Forgive me, the British are the ones, the first to come in. The British came, and I opened my eyes, and in front of me was a big British soldier. Said, you're free, you can go wherever you want, you can do whatever you want. Well, where do you go when you're alone left? So where do you go when you don't know anybody anywhere? Anyway, they took me to a hospital, and I recovered, and my sister was at that time not feeling good. But lucky for me, my sister had remembered my aunt. My mother had a sister in Uruguay, Montevideo. And she told us that she'd be happy to come make papers for art. So I was happy. I know someplace, somewhere, somebody wants us, and maybe we'll be a family. Well, my sister got sick. She got TB. Here we were liberated, already free. We could go whatever we wanted. Of course, we had nobody, just the two of us. My sister and I were the only survivors. But like I said, my sister just remembered my aunt, and we felt this is where we're going to go eventually. But my sister was taken to a Christian hospital because no hospital was going to take her in. She had a contagious disease. So there was a nun, and she took her in and said, let's, as girls, pray, and hopeful that she's going to get well. Well, she was not getting well, and there was no medicine for me to give her. And one day I went to visit her. I came to visit her, and the sister came in. Child, your sister's not going to make it. She's young, I know, but I don't have any medicine, and I cannot help you. And I said, well, sister, that's okay. Just let me in her room, and I lay without her, and I'm going to die with because I have no interest in being left all alone. So she said, no, child, I cannot let you in because Jesus would not approve of my behavior. Let's go. You go home and pray. I'll go pray to Jesus to let your sister live, but I cannot let you go in. The hospital building got dark. I didn't go anywhere. I just sit there in the back. When it got dark and quiet, I went into back of the hospital, and I went into my sister's room. And I held her hand, and I gave her a lollipop to suck on, and then I took it. I figured, this is going to be the best way for me to die and not be left alone. In the morning, the sister came in because I stayed. I didn't care. And she said, child, why did you do that? You know, if I can't keep you here, and I can't let you in either. But she said, maybe Jesus will forgive me this time and let you go home to your friend, and maybe your friend will help you not get sick. So that's how I lost my sister. She died right there in the hospital. And I didn't want to go on living. I had no interest in being alone. And at that time, we lived 5 girls in one room because we were all going somewhere. Sweden came out and made it possible for survivors, young people, to go to Sweden. If you wanted to go, you didn't have to have a visa. Anywhere else, you had to have a visa. Sweden, Cuba did it a short time too, you know, and this, what that time Red Cross put out light names of all the people that survived all over Germany in every city on the war. And this young man saw that his sister is alive and came into the room where I was laying in bed. And my friends say she doesn't want to live because she doesn't want to be alone, and she doesn't want to eat, and she doesn't want to do anything. And he's just scolded me. He said, no, that's not possible. 6 million Jewish people got killed. You're not going to be the one. You're going to be out from here. Get out from bed. He actually scolded me. And I thought, how dare? And he said, I'll take you to the doctor, and we will find out if you need help. Well, I went to the doctor, and fortunately, I didn't catch the bacteria, and I was okay. So he said, there it is. You're fine. You're going to live. You're going to join. We're going to join together. We go together to wherever you want to go. We decided on United States. And this is the man that I married eventually and was married to 64 years. And that's next, please. I said it all. Thank you for listening.
Ella, I'm sorry that you lived through this nightmare.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm sorry that your sister couldn't be by your side right now.
No.
I thank God that she saved your life.
Yeah.
Along with your husband who saved your life.
Yeah.
And I hope that in revisiting the pain and the trauma of these stories, you know that we here hold it with you.
Thank you.
I'm going to invite us to take a deep breath. And I want to say that I trust you. If at any point in our conversation you feel the need to get up and move around or get water or step outside for a moment, you're allowed to do that. I'm going to ask Jason Neidleman to share a little bit of your loved one's story.
Is that... Hello? Is that working?
Just click the button.
Hello? The light's on.
Yeah, try now.
How's that? Okay. Wow. I got to hear that story at lunch. So powerful, especially for me anyway, when your husband comes and says, 6 million Jews died. We're not letting one more die. I want to mention just very quickly, because Betty Krull is here, Arnold Krull, who's was my wife's grandfather, a very similar story in the Lodz ghetto, passed away a few years ago, also the march. And I've heard these stories from my family as well. Quickly, my mother was in hiding in Budapest. She was born in 1942. Her biological father was taken away very early on, at least, in the Hungarian occupation. And my mother went into hiding. They survived being hid by communists, which my mom didn't like to say because in 1956 she became a refugee from communism, but now she admits it was communists that hid us. They were connected in the community, and I think that's how they were able to survive. They had a lot of friends. And then my mom and my grandmother returned to their village after the war, and my mother married a man who she came to know as her father, and I knew as my grandfather. Their joke was because they were the only two Jews left in Kishkunfelethaza, in this little town near Lake Balaton. I don't feel up to speaking about this moment. The only thing that gives me a little bit of comfort is that my mother says the same thing. She's a survivor. She was in hiding. But she doesn't see herself as a survivor. There's politics around that. And even my grandfather, who was in work camps after the war, would have people say, well, you shouldn't call yourself a survivor because you weren't in a death camp. So I think it's fairly common among survivors, and certainly children of survivors, to not quite feel up to the moment. I just want to share quickly a couple stories from my grandfather, who, as I say, survived in concentration camps and then really, really suffered actually after liberation in a POW camp because there just wasn't anything to eat. Somehow he preserved his sense of humor, his love of humanity throughout the whole thing. But it was difficult when he saw me complaining. And of course, that makes it difficult on survivors because you feel like, well, what do I have to complain about? And I was a very picky eater as a kid. But for me, that mattered, that I did not want to have to eat that. And he would just stare at me in disbelief. And he'd say, you're not going to eat potatoes? I say, no, Grandpa, I don't like potatoes. He said, I'll put you in a Russian POW camp. You'll eat potatoes. And one more quick one. But anyway, that's indicative of maybe the struggles of the second generation, where you feel that maybe your problems aren't worth sharing. He also had a line. He loved everybody, and everybody loved him. But he did have a line about Germans because of what he'd been through. And I had a lot of roommates from around the world when I was in graduate school. I talked to them once a week, and there was people coming in and out from all over the world. And at the end of the conversation, he would always say, do you have any new roommates? I would say, yes, this one's from here, this one's from there. And he'd always say the same thing. He'd say, that's fine, just never live with a German. Never quite, it felt a little bit performative. Like it never quite felt like he actually believed that. But then one of my best friends is a German guy, and he did eventually move into the house. And I thought, this will be an interesting conversation with Grandpa this week, because he always says that same thing. And I said, yeah, Grandpa, we do have a new roommate. My grandpa says the same thing. Where is he from? I said, actually, Grandpa, he's from Germany. There's a pregnant pause in the conversation. And my grandfather says, Germany? He says, all right, so he's from Germany. And I love that story because if somebody who survived the Nazis in his lifetime, in the same lifetime, can come around to that kind of forgiveness for human fallibility and frailty, it gives us hope. You know, maybe in our generation or maybe in the next, that we can overcome some of the divisions that we feel, either within our community or between our community and other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And turn it over to Alexia Gyorody.
I wasn't ready to go. Okay, I wrote this down so that I didn't forget details, because when I'm nervous, I forget. Okay, I have tissues ready. All right. This is my story of hope and homecoming. I had a mostly idyllic childhood, living very close to a lot of extended family, and weekends full of two things: sports and church. See, I was actually raised in an evangelical Christian, Greek Orthodox family, believing that I was Greek. I went to church multiple times a week, vacation Bible school, and youth group. We had numerous versions of the Bible at our house, and I'd read it entirely by the time I was 8. I loved the Greek culture and history that I thought I hailed from. I learned Greek dances and primarily ate Greek food, second only to my favorite food, which was cereal. Hold on to this idyllic picture. Simultaneous to this reality was another. From toddlerhood, I had night terrors, but they had no visuals, just a sound and a feeling that would arise in me of extreme terror and wanting to hide. I had no idea what the sound was, and I didn't have words or a way to describe it. I only knew how it made me feel. My stomach would bottom out, and I would sometimes cry. In response, I established a routine of sleeping on the floor next to my parents' bed on a pallet of blankets. I didn't want to sleep in their bed so that I could be close to the underside of it, just in case I got too scared and wanted to go under there and surround myself with pillows. No one knew what was causing these night terrors, but very luckily, my parents held infinite space for me on their floor. Then one day, a few years later, I learned what the sound was. My parents told me to go upstairs and occupy myself because they and my sister were going to watch a mature educational video. Enraged, I did as I was told. I went upstairs and occupied myself with how to sneak back downstairs and secretly watch the movie from behind the couch. This hideous couch had 2 recliners that I knew my parents would always put up. I could army crawl under there and peek underneath. Sometimes it was Jerry Springer, but on this night, it was Schindler's List. And the moment I heard boots marching, my stomach bottomed out, and I knew that sound. It was the sound of my night terrors. But it made no sense. What does that mean, and why would it make me so scared? What the heck does this black and white educational video have anything to do with me? I believe this was my first experience with duality. I knew something but had no idea what to do with it, so I disregarded it. And miraculously, once I knew what the sound was, the night terrors stopped. So I moved on with life and kind of forgot about it. Until one day, a few years later, the man I'd known as my papu, Greek for grandpa, was dying. My yaya went to inquire about post-mortem affairs at a government office. The representative informed her that due to her first husband still being alive, there would kind of be a problem in receiving benefits from the second. When I heard this news, I thought, what blank first husband? Remember that mostly idyllic picture I told you to hold on to? Keyword mostly. One piece I left out earlier was that the elders in my family believed in corporal punishment. Another is that I struggled believing in Jesus as the Son of God and my Lord and Savior. It didn't sit right with me. I didn't want to be so involved in the church, and I didn't know if I was even Christian. But that was unacceptable in our family because it wasn't a matter of forming a belief in Christianity so much as following one. So despite taking issue with much of what I heard and read, I did my best to go along with what I was told, to not face the or else. Believe in this, go to church, or else. Maybe if I got baptized enough and went to enough Jesus camps, the click would come, but it never came. I knew something was off and that there was something more me out there. What I can tell you now is that my first grandpa's name was Joseph. And I'm not Greek, I'm Polish. The granddaughter of a camp survivor, my grandpa, Joseph, and a German Protestant child survivor, kept alive in a kinderheim at the top of a mountain, my grandma Katharina. I'm also Jewish. I can also tell you that what I thought was the greatest pain of my life was actually the click I'd been waiting for. I suddenly knew who I was, and it all made sense. What was so horrific and infuriating in the moment of learning a truth turned into my strongest muscle for connection and empathy, for understanding the complexity of people and their choices, for being an advocate of forgiveness, and someone in full awareness of the generational trauma of war and violence, immeasurable effects of survival. But at the time, the truth felt like a complete tragedy. Most of all, I felt inexplicable concern and sadness for my grandpa Joseph, who had helped our family have a future in America, but wasted away for multiple decades alone in a facility, with no knowledge of or pride in or connection to his family, his descendants, and legacy. He died shortly after the one and only time I ever met him. He sat in a wheelchair catatonic. My first and last prayer every day is that he finally knows peace and love, and maybe he has been shown or he can see his granddaughters and his great-grandson Ezra living in Beverly Hills, member at IKAR, and being champions of humanity and equity and peace and community care.
Amen. Thank you, Alexia. I just want to say amen to that final prayer, and amen with the belief that Joseph sees you in this moment, hearing you tell your story and his story, and perhaps bringing some assuredness to the enormous isolation that he was facing and that he faced in his life, knowing that you have embraced it and are telling his story. I'm going to ask Amit and Oren and Zeve to share the story of your grandfather and your great-grandfather.
Hi, I'm Amit Zilberstein. My grandfather, Yisrael Zilberstein, or Zilberstein, as we call it in Israel. He's currently 104 years old, still living in Israel. He was born in 1919 in Poland, in a small town, to a family of very religious Orthodox parents. His dad was Sofer Stam, is the person who actually writes the Bible and the mezuzahs and all that. And he had 10 other siblings. When he grew up, he wasn't so into studying Torah and being in the cheder and being like the rest of his siblings. So at the age of, I don't remember, either 8 or 10, his father said, okay, if you're not going to study Torah, we're going to make sure that at least you study some kind of a profession. And he sent him to one of his older brothers in a neighboring town to study how to be a shoemaker. So he was there for a few years, and then at the age of 15, he ran away from his house, and he joined. At that time, there were all these Zionist youth organizations that were all active. So he joined them, and then from that point on, he started living a totally different life, because before that, the only language he knew was Yiddish. He didn't even know Polish. He didn't know anything. They were in their little bubble, which I think, after the fact, that's probably what helped his survival later on. So he was there for a few years, and then the war started. So when the war started, he was already, 19, 20 years old. In those years, doing with the Zionist youth organizations, they pretty much taught them, they prepared them for moving to Israel eventually, right? So they prepared them how to farm, how to use weapons, how to be self-sufficient. So when the war started, they obviously started running away. One more detail, that's where he met my grandmother, Miriam. And while they were running away, at some point they ran also through, the Germans were already in Poland, they ran through his town, and that was the last time he saw his parents. He had from what he tells us, he had a Shabbat dinner with them, and his dad was wearing this sort of handkerchief over his face, and he was Orthodox, he normally had this beard, so when he took it off, he showed him that the Germans cut his beard with the flash. So, that was the start of all this. They came into those towns and did whatever they did. So that was the last time he saw them. From that point on, they kept on running. So the whole story of the war, they just kept on running. And there's many, many stories of how they were, they survived by luck or not luck, many different incidents. So they were trying to run east. Again, there's so many different stories that I'm not going to talk about them today. But they were running east, and at some point they went into this town where I think at that point they were already on the Russian side. And my grandfather, they took him to the Red Army. My grandma was pregnant. No, my grandma already had a baby. So they, throughout the war, while they were running, they got married, and they had a child. Her name was Henya. And in that town, I guess everybody was sick there. And my grandma was also got sick, and she went to the hospital, and she was unconscious for I don't know how long. And she was with the baby. When she woke up, they told her the baby died, and they didn't even show her, where they buried the baby or anything. And she was 21 years old, didn't really know much. So she just believed them, which later on, from stories that they told me throughout the life, they had many, many doubts. Maybe the baby was kidnapped while she was unconscious, and I think at some point she thought my grandfather was dead because she hasn't seen him in a while, and it was war, and she heard all these stories. But then one day, somehow, miraculously, they met again, and they just kept they just kept running, and eventually, the war ended. They moved to Israel. They had 3 children. And my grandfather still lives in the same house that they bought in 1948. My grandma passed away 7 years ago, at the age of 95. So yeah, they were married for 70-something years. And so the number one thing that I always remember about them, that they always cared about family. They was proud of every one of their children, and every Friday night, the whole family would see them. Even until today, every Friday there's somebody there, which I think that's what also kept them alive. They always had something to look forward to, and I think that's it. There's a lot. Again, there's a lot of stories. So while growing up, I heard here and there some stories, but I think something like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 2 of my cousins decided to actually film my grandparents, which luckily they did it then. So there's 5 or 6 DVDs full of just stories upon stories, and each one of them is crazy stuff. He even ended up in prison and ended up all these different crazy things that would make many, many Hollywood movies these days. But the number one thing, they always were just proud of their kids, of their family, and they always just lived towards the family. And luckily, the movie, the link that, if you guys got the email from IKAR, that was done a few years ago during COVID when my grandfather was 101 years old. He was starting to slow down. So luckily we caught that story then, and that's the story that if you guys haven't seen it, you can click on it when you go home. But that's sort of like a short version, a very short version of the story of his life.
Thank you, Amit. Just to follow up on that last point, we sent out in our communications about this gathering 2 links. One link is what Amit is just describing, a film about Yisrael that was put together by the Righteous Conversations Project with they're each pointing to each other. Sam and Lily helped put together in conjunction with IKAR's Limudim, and that's one of those links, and it tells still short but slightly fuller version of the story of Yisrael Zilberstein. And the other link that we sent out is a bit more of Ella's story, also produced by the Righteous Conversations Project in collaboration with Sinai Akiba, students over there. So encourage folks to follow up on this conversation by learning more and accessing those links. I wanna ask Zeve and Oren a question. I think some of us have seen some of the disturbing data and information out there about the growing number of young adults living in the United States these days who don't know anything about the Shoah, who haven't heard about the Holocaust, and in some instances maybe even worse, really deny the existence of this tragedy. And I'm wondering what kinds of conversations the two of you have had with your peers about your great-grandfather's story, and maybe more generally speaking, what you are hearing and seeing with your own ears and eyes in your school settings, youth group settings, right, other places where you're conversing with your peers. What are the kinds of conversations or stories that are being maybe exchanged about the Shoah, and what do you find, or what surprises you about what your friends do or do not know about the Holocaust?
Hi, I'm Oren. So yeah, my great-grandfather, I'm lucky enough to have a living great-grandfather and grandparents. I know that many people don't even have grandparents, so something really special. I go to an all-Jewish school, so most of my friends, most people I know are all Jews. Not many deniers, but I'll say that I think that just having a real-life connection and actually knowing people that went through this and not just hearing stories passed down is a really useful tool and something that's really personal. So I think having that information and that connection with my great-grandfather is something that will help me for the rest of my life, and hopefully I can use for anyone who would deny it. And I'm just glad that every time we visit Israel, we're able to see him, and I was able to see my great-grandmother when I was younger. And the video that I made also with IKAR, the stop-motion video, I wasn't too young, but I was like 11 years old, so I was pretty young when I made it, but I'm glad that we have all those stories, and I revisited that a couple weeks ago, and it was really special to see. So I'm just glad that we have all this information and personal knowledge that we can use.
Hi, I'm Zeve. I also go to the same Jewish school. We go to Toledo. And I mean, as a high school senior, I'm going to college next year. So there's definitely been a lot of conversations, especially what has been happening this year after October 7th, about kind of how to deal with anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. And I mean, I think we're really privileged going to a Jewish school. We've had the opportunity to really be educated on not only our history, but how to deal with people who deny it. For all seniors, it's required to take a one-semester Shoah course at my school. And we've also had speakers from the ADL, and I think Noah Tishby came. Stand with us. Yeah, there's been all sorts of really powerful Jewish speakers that have come to our school. And so not only talking, with my friends and with my peers, but also having these opportunities to hear from professionals and to really be educated on how to deal with people in the real world that, we've been lucky enough, we kind of live in a bubble of Jewish education, Jewish school, Jewish camp. So kind of having that exposure to what the real world might look like, because, obviously I know my great-grandfather's story, I know my religion, but it's kind of hard to express that to someone that doesn't necessarily know or have that intimacy with it all, or maybe just outright denies it. So kind of having that opportunity to really prepare for that has been good for me, especially going to college next year. And I mean, yeah, also just talking with friends, we've had discussions about what's going on in the world, what we are kind of able to do and how we see it. And just having those kinds of discussions along with what's been provided with school has been something really special to me. So, yeah.
I want to thank everyone up here, Zeve and Oren and Amit and Alexia and Jason and Ella, for opening up your hearts and sharing your stories today. I'm mindful of the time and how much work our hearts have done today. I want to close, though, with the following ritual. I'm the grandson and nephew of Holocaust survivors, and my grandmother, Sophie Salzer, and Morris, who I'm named after, were also in the Lodz ghetto. And I remember I have all these memories of visiting Holocaust Museum in DC. I grew up in Virginia with my mom, often as part of a school field trip or a synagogue field trip. And I remember the experience, third generation, watching my mom take in the sights and sounds and information of the Holocaust Museum. But truthfully, what most stands out to me about those trips to the Holocaust Museum with my mom was seeing how hard it was for her to walk away from that space. And in particular, to walk away from that space and watch the children and sometimes adults who she had taken on these field trips just quickly revert to whatever playfulness or joyful attitude they had on the bus beforehand, before entering the museum in the first place. So I want to ask, in honor of what my mom has taught me and in honor of my grandparents and all those who were mentioned up here, right, that we exit this space with a kind of quiet solemnity and respect for the conversations and the stories that were shared here. And perhaps when we're outside, don't want to discourage people, of course, from connecting from each other and checking in on each other, but maybe we'll exit this space quietly. And before doing so, I want to conclude with Kaddish. And I want to give folks an opportunity to say the names of any loved ones who either perished in the Shoah or survived the Holocaust but have deceased since, to say the names of your loved ones, and then together we'll say Kaddish. So if you'll stand in place as a way of showing me that you have a name to offer, we'll just go one at a time and then together say Mourner's Kaddish. Zichronam livracha. Toby Tamber. Zichronam livracha. Abel Iman. Phyllis Fields. Arnold and Yetta. Zichronam livracha. Meyer and Fella.
Auschwitz survivor. My aunt and uncle, both Auschwitz survivors. Both my grandparents, Auschwitz. Four nieces, four sisters, four brothers on my mother's side, and two brothers and two sisters on my father's side.
My mother, Ella Mandel Story, and my father, Oren Zilberstein, who passed away 2 months ago at 102.
Zichronam Livracha.
My grandma Miriam, who survived the Holocaust, Oren Zilberstein, her daughter Ella Zilberstein, who died, and their whole family, my grandmother's parents, 8 siblings, and anyone else.
My mom's father and/or later, who I'm named after, my middle name's Andrew. The entire later family murdered during the war. My step-grandfather, my mother's stepfather, Eugene Bulgar, and my grandmother, Elsa Bulgar, who survived and passed away after.
Do you want to say the names?
Yes. My husband has rescued me from dying. Too many to mention my friends in the family. Too many of survivors are going, unfortunately. Well, time is up. So just memorize them and get together and talk about it. It makes me feel good that you want to remember. Thank you.
I'm remembering Morris Salzer, Sophie Salzer, their parents, and all of their siblings. Morris Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'ama divrach cherutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam omei omayam. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudisha b'richu. Yehi shlama. Did I skip? Yehi shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories endure as a blessing. Shabbat shalom.